Hey, it's Les from the TV Dudes. This week, I was lucky enough to talk with actor Denim Richards. You may know him as Colby on Yellowstone over on the Paramount Network, or as Elijah over on Freeform's Good Trouble. It's a fun chat as we talk about his craft, his charity work, and much more. I hope you enjoy. Hey, Denim.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for taking out the time today. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I was just at ATX Television Festival, and I unfortunately did not get to catch the Yellowstone panel, but we were all discussing just how absolutely beautiful that show looks. And even if you know nothing about it, I mean, there's just something about that Western landscape. And y'all actually shoot in Utah and Montana for that. Is that correct?
Yeah, we shoot in Utah. We pretty much shoot like everything indoors in Utah for the most part, and then all the exteriors are in Montana. So it really does provide a very kind of beautiful landscape. It's something that I don't think we really see too often in television, where, you know, there's such a commitment to the landscape and the outside scenery, which I do think is one of the biggest draws of Yellowstone, because it kind of accentuates parts of America that we don't really pay that much attention to, you know. So it does make for a very good aesthetic, especially for filming.
I know for me, Westerns were the thing that, like, the oldest adult in the room would put the TV on when I was a kid. Like,
Right.
It was always like my dad or my grandfather would, you know, flip off the cartoons and onto a whatever Rifleman or Western or anything. Sure, I'm showing my age here. Did you grow up liking Westerns, or do you remember what the first... I remember
Honestly,
seeing Tombstone in the theater and thinking that's cool.
I think that my first Western was probably like a cartoon with I can't even remember the dude's name. He had like the long orange hair, the two guns, like really short. I cannot remember that cartoon.
Yeah, Yosemite Sam. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was like my first Western. It was funny. I mean, as a kid, it didn't like resonate with me heavily when I was younger. I definitely always enjoyed the like horse riding aspect of it all, but it wasn't something that I was necessarily immersed in, which is funny because even as I kind of got older and would imagine projects that I would be a part of, I never really imagined myself even in a Western aesthetic at all. So when like the last couple of years, when I had done this other film called Chickasaw Ranch, which will come out later this year, and now Yellowstone, it's very funny because it was just so opposite of kind of everything that I thought that I might be playing. But it's been such a great experience because I've learned so many different trades outside of just the art, just as far as kind of real hard work, I guess I would say. You know, just getting kind of like a sample of what it might be to actually feel and be like a real cowboy, which I have so much respect for, you know, those men and women, because it is such a hard job to do, you know, every single day. It's absolutely like astonishing to me.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Chickasaw Rancher as well, because yeah, it definitely, at this point in your career, it looks like you meant to go for Westerns.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. I mean, Chickasaw kind of came apart because I think because I sing as well, and so that role was very specific for needing somebody that could sing. And I had like a little bit of horse riding experience. It wasn't anything like grandiose though, because I did grow up in a big city. So I didn't really spend a lot of time doing that. But then when Yellowstone came about, I mean, Taylor, I remember like in a meeting that we had, was like, you know, this show is going to require like actual like hardcore kind of like horse training and stuff like that. But, you know, I just want to make sure you're up for it because, you know, we're going to make sure that we have the best of the best, for you guys. And they did, for all of everybody that actually rides in the show. Like, we've had the best trainers in the world and, are on some of the best horses you can get your hands on. So it's definitely been a phenomenal training experience, unlike anything that anybody would really ever get. But it's been very like rewarding and enriching. And because of this, I now want to own horses, but I just have to wait until I understand how to take care of them properly. but I will have them one day because of just because of these last like couple years.
Have you ever had to do something on a job where you realize, like, oh, hey, I turns out I do have a fear of horses. Oops. Or where you've agreed to something and regretted it?
It's funny, like, especially for this, like, I didn't have, I don't really have like a lot of things that I'm not really like crazy about. I've never really been big on like feeling like I need to do like my own stunts. Just because I feel like there's people that have trained their entire lives to do it. And just for me to kind of come on and do certain things. So there has been, I think there was only like one time maybe in this entire production, out of the 2 seasons that we've filmed, where I was like, yeah, I think this is probably just above my pay grade. And it was actually in the first season, there was like this big, it was kind of like a shootout between like the officers and like the natives and the men on the Yellowstone ranch. And we're like, it's probably like 3:00 in the morning, and we're in Deer Valley, Utah, or no, Thousand Peaks, Utah. So there was like just starting to get a little bit of like sleet on the ground. And so it's like this scene where you have like all these ATVs and trucks and helicopters, and we're on horses, and we kind of like lope up this hill. And I was like, yeah, I just don't think that this is for me. Like, I don't think that I think that this is above my pay grade. I feel like we need somebody that's like super experienced. And thank God my son's elbow, Glenn Jackson's been with me for like several years, so he's able to like fit in that effortlessly. But just with the helicopters and all the commotion and the rocks, I was like, yeah, I don't think I have enough experience yet. But that's been the only time. Everything else has been very, the team is just so good, and you don't really do anything that you don't feel comfortable with. And obviously, once you're kind of out there, you just kind of feel like you're a cowboy. But the horses will let you know how much of a cowboy you are pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But it's always been like a great experience just working with all of them.
Now, Good Trouble, I'm assuming has to be shooting in LA.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit I'm not sure how much, spoiler-wise, I don't want to give away details about Elijah across the season, but can you talk any about your role on Good Trouble coming up?
Yeah. I play his character Elijah. He plays the love interest of Gael, who's played by Tommy Martinez. And essentially, it's this character that Gael and Elijah had like previously been in a relationship when they were in college, and it was like I guess a very like impassioned relationship. So it was kind of like, I think both of them were kind of like learning how to love, but then also like learning how to have like a college experience and focus on their work. And for whatever reason, it just didn't work out. And so now Elijah has decided that he's going to move back to Los Angeles and start a business where he starts designing, clothes for red carpet, celebrities and stuff like that. And then tries to reconnect with Gael and, really wants to kind of prove to him that he's a different man than he was before, and that, the things that were in the past that were bad are different now because there's, he's older and more mature. So really Elijah's whole thing, kind of, especially in this first half of the season, has been very much about trying to prove to Gael that, he can be trusted again emotionally with his heart and with his soul. And so it really makes for a great kind of triangle because Elijah's character doesn't know that Tommy, has a love interest, another like female love interest at that time, Callie. He doesn't really know all of this, and Gael doesn't really disclose that information. So it's kind of a nice, it kind of makes for a nice kind of aesthetic, I guess, like going into the season and with this kind of like weird love triangle that starts, and kind of being able to massage that. It's been quite an experience, especially coming off of like a Yellowstone where I play something completely different, and then being able to be on the other end of the spectrum and get to play something that's very, I guess, like emotional driven and something that's very, it's just a different thing when you're going from kind of cowboy to, fashion designer in Los Angeles. Different world. But the Good Trouble, like, cast and crew and everyone is so amazing. And Elijah's character I really kind of resonated with very quickly, because I think we've all kind of been there, I think, in our early 20s and late teens where, you found people you really connected with, but you just maybe didn't have the maturational process to actually, like, handle that type of, like, impassioned relationship, if you will. And so me having been there, it was kind of fun to kind of go back and explore those kind of, like, earlier days of emotion.
Did you find yourself wanting to take any of Elijah's clothes home?
Man, all the time. Every single fitting, I'm like, I need to know where you guys get these. And so it's funny too, because it's like some of the places, that they get the clothes, it's like I shop at those places like Zara and stuff like that. And I'm like, for whatever reason, whenever I go into these stores, I don't find any of these cool outfits.
Right. Yeah.
It's like
I'm never putting this together.
They tell me, so it's very funny. So I'm like, I definitely just want to give them a credit card and just be like, just hold that wild for me, because everything that they've put me in for the show has been absolutely amazing. And I tell them, I was like, never could I as a person be this cool, but Elijah has definitely allowed me to be, so I'm very grateful for that. It's like a cherry on the cake for me.
That's got to be fun, being able to play a role and get used to that feeling of I am this cool for these hours a day, and just kind of get used to that.
It is very cool. And then, the moment that I take those clothes off and put on my regular, like, sweatpants and t-shirt, I realize, okay, like, it's just work. But it's such a cool thing. And one thing that's great is, like, with both shows especially, it's like, because you're kind of wearing this wardrobe that is so opposite of what I would ever wear, you really get an opportunity to kind of, like, immerse yourself in those characters, and there's just not a lot of, like, me as a person that's, like, driving these characters a lot. So it's like, it's really nice to be able to kind of make up everything about your character, which I think is nice to kind of have, like, a blank slate to kind of go off of. And I think that's one of the things that's been so enriching, is just being able to kind of, like, play with the universe. And, even for me, it's like, even growing up in LA, or in Orange County, really, like, growing up in a big city, I was never huge into fashion, never really cared too much about it. So then to kind of play a character that's a little bit more eccentric in those ways is also, like, another cool kind of layer, just to experience as an artist.
Something that I'd seen in your bio that impressed me is the amount of giving back that you do, and the work you do with both Rain and Ralph Foster Children. Can you talk a little bit about where you feel most impactful, and what you feel your best contribution back into those organizations are? If people have a limited amount of time in their week, where would you recommend that they look?
I think for me, it's always, I think that, when I was younger, I always kind of had these certain things that I always think that I probably wanted to experience. Like, I think I have an older brother who's like 8 years older than I am. And so when you're younger, that 8-year gap is so big and so vast. So there wasn't, like, a lot of time of, like, where I'm going out and playing basketball or football and stuff like that with him. And then, like, our dad died when I was very young. And so as I was younger, there was a lot of things that I had to teach myself. And you kind of, like, through using, like, your imagination and stuff like that, like, even playing basketball, like, you're just imagining that you're playing against somebody else. It sounds sadder than it is. but like it's or sorry, no, it doesn't. It's not as sad as it sounds. But it was just cool to be able to kind of, use your imagination in that way. But then also there was also that wanting to be able to kind of connect with somebody and have you kind of teach, certain things that you just might not be good at yet. And so as I kind of got older, there were so many things, especially in entertainment, that I loved. But then I also was like, well, I felt like there was so much more that I could be doing and should be doing. And so it really started with this group that I used to belong to, which was an entertainment group. And on Fridays, they used to mentor at a school. And the first school that we mentored at was Martin Luther King Elementary School in Los Angeles. And essentially we would just go in on Fridays, and it would be like, 25 kids that would kind of come in here, and they're like their fifth period. And they would just kind of sit with us and talk with us and, talk to us about what their hopes and dreams were and stuff like that. And every time I went there on a Friday, it would always be Friday from like 3 to 5. It was always the best part of my week. It was something that was completely, had nothing to do with me, had nothing to do with me as an artist. It was just about these kids and the enrichment of them and their lives. And you could tell how impactful it really was, because in the beginning the kids were kind of resistant to it because it was so new for them. But then it was like, they would be writing in their journals during the week, and there'd be all this stuff that they wanted to share with you. And I always wanted that feeling. So I kind of, really wanted to dedicate myself to doing that. So I started an organization called Youth Empowering Success. And pretty much what all that is pretty much like an extension of this program, where, we just kind of adopt different Section 8 housing or homes and stuff like that, and kind of get the kids involved, and we just go and sit with them and kind of mentor them. But really it's kind of to try to like plant these seeds with them. I kind of liken it to like showing a kid an acorn and getting them to see an oak tree. And it's kind of trying to get them to experience life and be able to understand that there's so much of life that is waiting for them to explore, and that, if you can, stay focused and, be passionate about anything, you can really accomplish whatever you want. But it's just kind of like getting that into their system, because a lot of kids don't really have that feeling. They don't really have that feeling that there's anything waiting for them outside of their set of circumstances. So for me, I've always just really wanted to empower kids in that way, which comes, a little bit from when I was younger, but then also just because it's like, I'm so lucky to be doing what I'm doing. And I just feel like any way that I could use what I'm doing to better our next generation is the most rewarding thing that I can do, like ever, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like that. I like that acorn and getting them to see the oak tree, because for so many of us, the act of growing up is the act of reducing the like, I can be anything. I can be a fire truck or a spaceman, or like down to like, nah, you could sell insurance though. And it's great to remind that like, no, growing up means more agency in your life, not less. Right.
And I do think it's hard, and I think that, it's just a lot of circumstances. And I think, for a lot of kids, especially, in Los Angeles and all parts of, the country, I just have to speak to LA because it's specific to me. But, there is a lot of kids that there's so many wants and dreams. And one of the things that I learned very early on, working with my first experience at Martin Luther King Elementary was like, all the kids in the beginning, they all want to kind of be athletes and, musicians or actors, and something that's like high in the entertainment field. But that's because usually entertainment gets more publicity. It looks more glamorous. But then when you kind of really get to talk to them, get to know them, throughout the months, you start finding out that they want to be astronauts and biologists and chemists and all these other things. And so it's like, for them, it's like getting them to understand, like, that's not a weird thing to want to do. And that's amazing. And that really moves the world forward, and so it's kind of like just empowering them to use their imagination, to use those things that maybe their circumstances around them wouldn't really necessarily say is something that's okay for them to do, but really allowing them to kind of take full advantage of that. So, I feel like as artists, I think that we get a great opportunity to kind of go in every day and kind of make up whatever we want to make up, and that's really fun. So we always kind of get to be a kid. So I think it's always unfortunate when it's like there's actual kids that don't feel like they are able to be kids. So any way that I can kind of give back to that, I will always make sure that I'm available for it.
Man, that's beautiful. Thanks for talking to me today about the shows, about the charities, everything. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed getting to chat with you.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to hear how everything turns out.
The TV Dudes is an independently run podcast and a member of the Electric Sweater Podcast Network. We are exclusively listener supported. If you'd like to help us out, go to patreon.com/tvdudes. You can like us on Facebook and Twitter @TV Dudes. All the music for our show is by our friend and original TV dude, Gregory J. Amani Smith. To find out more about us, go to thetvdudes.com and electricsweater.com. I'm Grant Davis. Thanks for listening.